Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Heather here at the U.S. Embassy in our consular section, and I am joined by my colleague Kelly.
Hi, thanks to everyone for joining in today.
We're really thrilled to be here. Both of us have worked in the consular section for quite a while. I've been in Nigeria for almost 2 years. Kelly has been here for about a year. And we are really privileged to actually be here and have the opportunity to talk with you. We often see issues on our forums, which is the subject of today's Facebook Live, on the CF form, the DS-160. And so we wanted to take the opportunity to talk with you all, answer questions specifically about the form, common mistakes that we see, answer, of course, visa questions that come up, general ones. So we're going to go through the form, not line item by line item, but we're going to talk about issues that we see with the goal of helping you all out there fill out these forms correctly and make the process a little bit more smooth and transparent. So I think with that, we will go ahead and start.
Yeah, and it's just really important to emphasize that, you know, if you make a mistake on the form, it can often maybe prolong your interview or just add to confusion. So the more accurate you can be, the better and more efficient we can be in our interviewing.
And that is why we're here to help you. So let's get started.
So looking at one of the first fields is, it says personal section in the DS-160. And it starts off by having you put your name. And it's really important that you list your current name as it is legally on your passport. But there's also a field there that says other names used. And we've noticed that a lot of times people will have, you know, a maiden name that they will list, or they have maybe made some changes to their first names or something like that. Just in the interest of providing all the information possible, it's really good to put it all out there. Even if you think, oh, I didn't really use that name officially, if you've ever gone by another name, list it.
Absolutely. And we know that these mistakes happen when you get passports. They might have a slight misspelling of the name. It is really important to list those names out there so that we can use them and have them in our, in our systems, and then we don't have to slow down the process later to get that kind of information.
And also in this section, it talks about, you know, your marital status. So if you're married, please list that you're married. If you're single, list single. I know that seems very, very basic, but these are things that people don't put right, and then you find out that they're married or they're single or whatever, and it really helps us because a lot of times we're looking at the application information kind of as you're coming up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it cannot be underestimated how important it is that this form is completed accurately and precisely, because this is one of the first things that we are using when we start your interview. This is the first document that we're really looking at. So it is important, as Kelly said, that you're putting all the names correctly and your status.
All right, and so moving to the next field, which is passport. This one we don't see as many mistakes. It's pretty straightforward, but it can cause a problem if you list your passport number wrong. Mm-hmm. It might, if we issue your visa and then you have the wrong passport number in there, we won't be able to actually do it. So just be careful when you're putting that in. Make sure each digit is correct. And also, if by chance you are applying with a different passport, let's say you're a dual national, make sure you have your right passport corresponding to the right number. But generally, that's not one that we see too many problems. Okay. So next, we'll go to the travel section. All right. So this is where we start to see a few more errors or mistakes when you're filling it out. So it's really important when there's a field there that says intended length of stay in the United States. Put how long you intend to stay. Don't put what you think we would like you to say. Just be straightforward. Any thoughts on that?
That is really, really important. If you want to stay 4 months, put you want to stay 4 months. That does not disqualify you for a visa. We often hear that people put the standard 2 weeks because they think that is what we want to hear, or in some way that means that they're reaching better qualified for a visa. That is not the case. What we want to know is what your actual intended length of stay is. It gives us a better picture of what you're planning to do in the United States, how you're planning to travel, etc. So when you want to go to the US for 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 months, put that down. It's very important for us.
And I mean, you could always, if you put it down and then you wait a while for your appointment and your intended length of stay changes, just when the officer asks, you can mention that, and just so all the current information is in front of the officer. That is what's most important during the interview. So next, another field is address. And if you are, for example, planning to stay with a family member or a friend, take the time to actually find out where the family member lives if you're not sure, and put it in the right address. Don't just say, I'm going to New York, New York, when you're going to visit your cousin in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
Put Brooklyn, New York, and all that information is helpful, and it gives us a better picture of why you're intending to travel.
And for those of you who are pre-planning and are not intending to go on vacation until, say, September or even November or December of next year, and you don't know exactly where you're staying, that's okay too. You don't have to put a hotel you find online there. Just let us know that you're planning to go to Hartford, Connecticut. And if you don't have an exact address, that does not disqualify you for a visa. The main point of this is that we have as accurate as possible information, because we want to know where you're traveling, what your purpose is, etc. We also know that people, and we really encourage this, plan ahead and get their visas ahead of time. And you may not have all the exact information, but if you can get as close to it as possible, that would be really helpful for us.
Okay. So next we want to talk about travel companion. I think that's the next section.
Is that people will say that they list only the people that they're traveling with who need visas. We ask that you put everyone, as Kelly stated. We often have people coming in and saying, have a couple of their family members who are U.S. citizens, and that's great. Put them on the form as well. If you're traveling with as a family, it's better for us to know, because we will wonder, last time you had 3 children with you, now you're only listing 2. We still want to know that you're traveling with all 3 children. So it is important that you're listing everybody who's going with you, not just those who need a visa for this.
And also sometimes another thing that I've seen is, let's say one of your family members already has a visa, but you'll be traveling with them. It's helpful to put that on there, because we can also verify that other family member already has the visa. So we just, need all the information that you have.
And this makes the whole process a little bit faster, more efficient for both us and for you as you're coming in. We don't want to waste your time and have to hunt for things that if you have the information at the fingertips, then we can go right from there, and it makes the whole process a lot easier and more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're going to look at the U.S. contact.
For training or your conference.
Absolutely.
Okay, moving on a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit about the previous travel. Interviews. This also is 100% applicable to individuals who are applying through Dropbox. So you may have had 10 visas. We are still seeing the same types of mistakes and errors on applicants, or applications rather, who have come from people who've done Dropbox multiple times. So this is valuable for first-time applicants as well as applicants who are applying multiple times over. One of the biggest challenges or errors that we see is this section. Have you been to the US? For anyone who is Dropbox, for most people who've done Dropbox, the answer is yes. Although there are plenty of instances where applicants have not actually traveled on their visa, and we'll get to that later. The second piece of this is what we see, probably I would say one of the most erroneously completed pieces of this form. Provide the information on your last 5 visits. This means that if you have been to the US, we want to know the last 5 visits. We don't need space for everything before that, but a lot of people only put 1 visit or their most recent visit. We want to know the last 5. If that last 5 included one that was a transit for 24 hours, and then one that was 2 weeks, and then one that was a week, and you went, twice 1 year and didn't go 2 years but went in 2013, we still want to see those visits. It's the last 5 visits. It's important. There is a drop-down piece on this. When you're looking just at the form, it just shows, date arrived and length of stay. But when you're filling it out, you can add the additional visits. So we're looking for the last 5. The reason this is so important is it helps us look and see how you've traveled on your visa. This is also important when you tell us exactly how long you have been in the United States. We can verify how many times you've entered the United States and the length of time, but it makes it a lot more straightforward and simple when you have it laid out for us and we can glance and we can talk to you about your last travel to the U.S. We often see people who just put the standard 2 weeks in, or if you're a Dropbox applicant, people don't often update the form, so they will submit the same SEAC with only those same 2 visits for the last 3 Dropbox processes, and that doesn't help us. We want to know a little bit more about that. So I would say that this is really important, and so make sure that when you're doing that, you're putting in when you traveled and the length of stay for the last 5. If you've traveled fewer than 5 times, then you're only putting as many as you've traveled. If you have traveled more than 5, again, only the last 5 visits.
Yeah, and as just to reemphasize what Heather already said, it's critical to our decision making and our ability to apply the law, which is basically what we're doing in any interview. We're applying the law to your circumstances. So if we don't have your correct circumstances, it just makes it a little bit more difficult.
Okay, going through the rest of this, it is also important, there's a lot of yes-no questions. Again, these are questions we want you to be as truthful and forthright on all of this. If you've had a driver's license, put it down. There are plenty of times when applicants have had driver's license, they've been over students, etc. That's totally permissible. We just want to have that information. The other one we often see, have you ever had a visa, have you ever been refused a U.S. visa? This is a question that I think a lot of people skip. And for many people, the visa application timeline can be quite long. You might have been refused a visa in 1999. That's still important to put down there that yes, you were refused a visa at one point. You could have been refused a visa last year. If you're not putting it down, that raises questions, and we just want to know that. So make sure that when you're looking through all these yes-no questions that you're really taking the time to read each question and see if it applies to you. If you're putting that you have been refused a visa before, that does not mean that you're going to be refused a visa again. We're just looking for the information. Sometimes people have said that they're a bit worried about putting it down because they think that makes them less qualified, and we assure you that that's not the case.
And I think sometimes too people can get confused if they were refused and then issued. Oh, I don't need to put that refusal down. But just, what Heather said, yes, please do, because then we just have more complete information.
And we do know that there are a lot of people, a lot of applicants coming in. A lot of people have family that are over in the U.S. who may have been filing for them for different immigrant visa processes. That's also important to put down. That does not necessarily impact your qualifications for a visa. If your mother or sister is filing for you, some of those processes can take a long time. So we're not looking at necessarily how that impacts it per se, but we do want to know if that's the case. So if that is something that is on the books and you have an application open, please do put that yes, someone is filing for you. Okay, work, education, and training. I think one of the biggest things that we've seen in Nigeria is that everyone does a lot of different jobs and work and things like like that, and it's great. We have met people from all different sectors, and it's a lot of fun to kind of learn about what people do from different regions, etc. It's important, though, that you're also putting down here that you're not overemphasizing or kind of amping up what you do. So when you are a director, put a director. You don't have to make it higher to make yourself more qualified. Please do put the most accurate information you can on this employer and on this work and education piece. When we're talking about your monthly income, I know that sometimes can be a hard number to put in. We know that there are the base salary, we know that there are allowances, etc. That is an opportunity that you can talk to at the interview as well. You can say, this is my base salary, these are my allowances. We know that especially in the civil service, if you increase your steps and your grades, that comes with increase in allowances, and you have different things that all kind of come together to paint a really strong picture of your economic ties to Nigeria. So we do ask that people put in there what is pretty accurate and as close to what you think is a real representation of what you are earning.
And we understand that it's not necessarily an exact number, as you were saying.
Yeah.
We get it.
That's a great thing to talk about at your interview. We don't really see that many issues on the address and phone situation. It's pretty straightforward. It's great. We're not going to really talk too much about that. Family, this is something that is also important. When we're talking about this, I see a lot of times you maybe not always have the parent information, especially if we're dealing with much older applicants. They may not know exactly when their parent was born. That's okay. But we do ask you try and get that as close as possible. One thing we do see, though, is the question of, do you have immediate relatives in the United States, not including your parents? Because the question about the parents, of course, is above. When we're talking about immediate family in the United States, we are talking about children, your spouse, and so forth. That is really important. If your child is in the U.S. on a student visa,
or is a U.S. citizen,
or is a U.S. citizen living there, or is on holiday there, that is where you would put yes. We often see people who are putting family in the U.S. and they are either answering no to the question because their child or family member is a U.S. citizen, and so they think that that's not something they need to note here. It is. We do want to know. It helps paint, again, the big picture about your qualifications for a visa. Other relatives in the U.S., that is where we get into all the other relatives, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins, etc. Many, many people have relatives in the United States. That's great.
And many of those people get issued visas.
Absolutely. Having lots of relatives does not make you disqualified for a visa. You can have all your family in the U.S. and this still does not mean you're not qualified for a visa. But it is information that we want to know and helps us adjudicate our visa process here. The same goes for the spouse. We do want the full name, all the pertinent information on that. If your spouse is in the United States, maybe as a student or as there on a specific work classification visa, put it down here. It's important. We do often see that people put that their spouse is in Nigeria when actually they're in the United States, and it makes for a little bit of a confusing moment at the interview. So we're trying to help people avoid that kind of issue.
And also, I think as part of the spouse part, there is a spot to put if you have a spouse that is deceased or a former spouse, put that information in as well.
Absolutely. And also, good point to bring that up. Thank you for reminding us. Also, if you have separated or divorced your spouse, we also want to know that. It's especially for people whose circumstances have changed as they've been applying for visas or are renewing their visas through Dropbox. When you're updating this form, the CX, this DS-160, you need to be putting your changes in your marital status if they apply. So if you were divorced 5 years ago, we would like to know that now. It helps us.
Right. So.
And then we have, of course, the whole series of security and background questions. We don't see too many issues with this, but I would say the one issue that we see where it's most applicable is where people talk about, or they tend to put no if you've been arrested or convicted for an offense or a crime. That is really important for us to know. And if you are putting no on a past visa, even if it was 20 years ago,
40 years ago.
Exactly. I mean, we have a lot of cases where it goes way back. it's even if charges were dismissed or acquitted or whatever the outcome was, or if you served your time and you've left and it's been 20 years, etc., we still need to know this. It is a very important question. I'd say when we do see it, or when it comes up most frequently as an error, it's because someone had that in their background and they did not put it. Now listen, there are a lot of reasons people run into issues. You can be issues of parking violations, traffic violations, etc., minor theft, things like that. They're not all immediate disqualifications for a visa. We've had plenty of people where that's not the case, but it is an important factor to consider your application, and we will ultimately, I think, eventually determine whether or not that actually was the case and find out. So we're asking you to help make our job easier, as well as make the whole process smoother for you, as to make sure that you are putting that down. When you do put yes to that, there is a space that drops down that allows you to put details of the event. And then that's a great starting place for, when it comes up in your interview, to be able to say, yes, this happened in 1993, I was a student, and go forth from there.
Yeah, and it's important if you answer yes to that question, that then when you're in the interview and they're asking you questions, just be as straightforward, forthcoming about what happened. Even if it was a long time ago, the more information you provide us with, it's just helpful in making our decisions.
Absolutely. So again, that being forthright and telling us the answers on that goes all the way through the rest of those security background questions. I know there's quite a lot of them. We're going to jump right now to the end, which is another big thing. I would say I think maybe the second largest space where I see a lot of errors on the SEAC. At the very bottom, there is a section about location, prepare, and submission. This is very, very important. We see this, I would say, daily, if not multiple times a day. We understand that sometimes applicants have assistance, completing the application, and we'll get a little bit more into that a bit later. But there's a very clear question here. It says, did anyone assist you in filling out this application? The vast majority of people put no. That's not always accurate. When you have any kind of assistance filling it out, and I would say this is oftentimes with elderly applicants who have their children fill out the application. Obviously minors, their parents are filling out the application. In some cases you might be using a protocol officer or a family member to help you. That is where you put yes, and then you put the information of the person filling it out. Because as you put that information in there, it helps us understand, and it's a very important piece of that. One of the main reasons is because when you submit this application, you and you alone are responsible for all the content in this application. You are verifying that everything in here is accurate and true. And if you haven't filled this application out and you are not looking at the application, you're still held responsible to it. So it is helpful when you put that you had someone else to help it. Like I said, we often see it with elderly people, and minors, and people using protocol officers, but we do often see a lot with visa touts, and we'll get to that in a little bit later. So I think that kind of discusses the major errors that we see on the SEAC. I think we'll just quickly recap. Put the 5 visits. Those are important. Your 5 last visits. Put all the names that you've used, your maiden name. If you've changed your first name, I know a lot of people do that for cultural reasons. Put that name down so that we have it. Make sure you're telling us how long you actually want to stay in the United States. If you want to go for 5 months to see your grandchildren, but you're putting 2 weeks on that form, we'd much rather see you put the 5 months down. And if you have any assistance in prepping that application, make sure you put yes to that and who's helped you with that.
So we received a few questions kind of in advance of this session. So we're going to start off with a few of those questions, and then we'll get to some of the questions that you're asking right now.
Yeah. And I just want to put out there, it's a live session, so please send your questions in. We're getting them. We will answer them as best we can with the time that we have allotted. And we certainly want to answer your questions specifically on the SEAC, so if you have questions about that, please send them in. We will, of course, address larger visa questions and about the overall process. I do want to put out here, as we do with every session, we will not be addressing case-specific issues. So if you're writing in asking about your specific problem that you have, we won't address individual cases at this forum. If you have questions, you of course can reach out to us through other channels, through our email address, which we will share all that contact information at the conclusion of this Facebook Live. Okay.
So one question that we got before we started was, why is the application fee non-refundable?
This is a big one. We get this a lot.
And the most important thing to think about with the application fee is that it's a fee for the process. It's a fee that is spread out among various agencies that help do both the scheduling, that help do all of the processing before you even get to your interview. And the fee is for the interview. So you're not paying for the visa, you're paying for the interview, the process, and the ability to schedule your interview.
So the whole application process, the fee is not the visa. It is all the effort and all the many hands and individuals who go into supporting that entire piece from start when you first open that website to fill out your application until your interview.
And also someone wanted to know about the high cost of the visa fee and whether or not there's any flexibility to have that fee be reduced. And unfortunately, there's no ability to change this, the application fee, because it's a set standard throughout many countries of how much it costs to do all of that processing. And so the same sort of can be said for any types of discounts for certain groups. Someone had asked about, can you reduce the fee, for example, for senior citizens? And again, because it's a set standard throughout the world, there's not any ability to change that.
And I just want to interject here and remind everyone that the fee that we're talking about is specific to the B1, B2 visa at this point in time. There are different fees for other classifications of visas, but the one that we're talking about right now, for the one when we're talking about the 160, is for this B1, B2 visa. I'm going to go ahead and take a question from one of our audience members. The question we've gotten is, I want to know if consular officers are given a target number of visas to issue a day. Absolutely not. There are no quotas at all. We issue to as many or as few qualified applicants who qualify for a visa under our U.S. immigration law. There are absolutely no targets, no quotas of any kind. We can issue a large number or a small number. It absolutely depends on who is qualified and how they're presenting the qualifications at that interview. One question we often see here that's coming in that's a lot is about travel history. One of the people have written in, one of our audience members had written in about, do you need previous travel experience to qualify for a visa? Kelly, I hear this a lot. People assuming that they need to have demonstrated that they are traveled to other countries. You know, and this raises some questions about, here's a good point that I'm going to get into, about touts or visa agents sometimes. Travel to previous countries and demonstrated travel to other countries does not make you qualified for a visa. We definitely have instances of applicants who are highly qualified and the U.S. is their first international trip ever. And I want to make this very clear. People think that because you need visas from other countries to demonstrate your qualifications, and sometimes that means they come in with false visas or visas for countries that they have never traveled to and they say that they have. And that does a lot more harm than good when you're trying to demonstrate your ties to Nigeria. We would much rather you come in with a passport that is completely blank and when you're honest and say you've never traveled, than when you're coming in with visas or stamps to places you haven't been, but you're trying to say that you have. Travel to other countries is not a qualification. It certainly is something we look at for those who have traveled, and we're looking at the overall qualifications for applicants, and it ties into the larger picture, but it is by no means an absolute.
Yeah, and I think it's just important for people to remember that we're taking into consideration 10 10 to 20 different things at the same time. So one thing in and of itself, for example, travel or whether or not you're married, those things are not going to be the deciding factor because we're looking at each individual as a whole person, not just one part of their circumstances.
Okay, I'm going to take another question from one of our audience members. Getting a visa in the country of residence. One of the people who've written in is asking, they're currently a student in one of the Schengen countries and they hold a residence permit and they want to go to the United States for summer vacation. You can absolutely apply for a visa in that country. You don't have to come back to Nigeria in order to apply for a visa to the United States. If you were a Nigerian and you were residing in another country, our embassies and consulates are global. You can apply for a visa in that country. That should be no problem.
Right, and obviously you can apply in your country of residence, no problem, but if you can actually apply anywhere. It's preferable that you apply in your country of residence or somewhere where you were born, somewhere that you can kind of demonstrate your ties, but you can apply anywhere, as you said.
Yeah, we see a lot of applicants, returning applicants, who got their initial visa perhaps from another country where they were studying. UK is a popular one. I know a lot of people go to school there. Their first visa might have been issued out of our consulates in London. Okay, let's see. Here's another one from our applicants here. Can I still apply for a student visa? I hadn't been denied last year and have deferred my admission. What are your chances? Absolutely. There is nothing saying you cannot reapply. We encourage people when they find that they are stronger applicants or believe they have a stronger application to definitely reapply. Students, we do see a lot who are coming in, maybe denied their first year and the second year coming in to say, can I apply for a student visa again? I'm going to take a moment here to put in a little plug for talking about student visas. When you're coming in for a student visa, please be very specific. We do really want to know why you're taking the time to invest a significant amount of time, years in many cases, as well as a large portion of funds in the United States at student school. We want to know why you picked the school, why out of all the other schools. So please, when you're coming in for a student visa, be specific. Really talk to us as to why this school is the best for you. But absolutely, there is nothing that says that if you were denied first, that you're not going to be issued again. We certainly, both Kelly and I have issued people that have been denied before, students and non-students. You are absolutely welcome to reapply.
All right, so another question here is it true that Dropbox grace has been reduced from 12 to 11 months? No?
No. What is true is that it used to be that your Dropbox period was 24 months from the expiration of your last visa. That has been reduced to 12 months from the expiration of your last visa, so that is the change. But there is no change from 12 to 11.
So one other question that we got before the presentation was, can you rely on experienced visa agents to complete the DS-160 form? And I think Heather kind of started to talk about this a bit earlier in the presentation, but it's your responsibility, even if you use a visa agent, to verify that all the information on your application is correct. We're not saying that you can't use somebody else to help you, but it's ultimately your responsibility.
And we're going to put in a kind of a service announcement here. We strongly recommend that you do not use touts. As Kelly said, you and you alone are responsible for all that information, and what you're putting forth in the application is a true representation of who you are as an applicant. We do not recommend tout services. We want applicants to be doing this on their own and filling out. Obviously, if you're getting help from a family member, like especially with elder or minors, that's okay. But if there are pieces in your form that are filled out inaccurately, incorrectly, you are still responsible for all that information. And if you do use any kind of visa agent, you must review that form very carefully. I cannot tell you how often I have heard individuals say that they used a tout and they didn't read the form before it was submitted. And that does raise a lot of questions because the information we're reviewing is not accurate.
And when you hit submit on your online form, you're saying under oath that all of this information that you've provided is true. So that's why we've, been kind of saying on repeat a little bit that it's ultimately, it's all up to you. It's your responsibility to verify that everything is correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna take another one here from our audience. Do you have to fill out the DS-160 if you're applying for a P-class visa? Is it true that if the applicant is denied a visa, if the applicants have relations in the United States because the applicant will not return to Nigeria? There's two questions within that. One, yes, you still fill out that 160 for that classification of visa. And denied a visa if there are relations in the United States. No, that has no bearing. We actually want to know. That's what we have 3 different questions about if you have family in the United States. There are plenty of people that get visas who have, siblings in the U.S., children even in the U.S., parents. No, that does not have any bearing on whether or not you're qualified for a visa.
Right, and just to keep in mind that the DS-160 is the online application form for any non-immigrant visa application. So if it's a B1, B2, if you're applying for an H1B to work in the United States, you'll have additional paperwork for those types of visa classes, but you will always do the DS-160. That's kind of like the basics for any
absolutely. Let's hear another question from our audience. When does one pay the SEVIS fee, before or after the interview? And if it's after and it's denied, will you retrieve it? The SEVIS fee is also non-refundable, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
You do want to pay that before your visa interview. Excuse me. That is easy because then if you're given the visa or adjudicated appropriately and you're issued the visa, we can then go right ahead and do that. We cannot issue a student visa without the SEVIS fee being paid. So if you were issued and you have not paid the SEVIS fee, it will delay your process because we will not move until we see evidence of that paid and it reflected in the system, which can take multiple days. So if you're applying for a student visa, you do want to pay that in advance.
So another question we have here from the audience is, what is 221G? And you'll see that come up a lot of the times with people that have had visas before. They apply Dropbox and they receive a notice asking them to come in for interview. It's just for 221G, it's generally just that you need to come in to interview to talk to the officer. It can be for a whole variety of different reasons.
Yeah, it just means that we're going to have a further discussion. Some of that 221G is based sometimes on inaccurate information that is in your CF, which is one of the reasons we're doing this today. There can be a whole bunch of reasons, but that is the classification, which just says your application needs additional processing, and we're going to work through that. Let's see, we get this one a lot. Can you repeal a visa refusal? The answer to that is no. You can reapply, but you cannot appeal a visa refusal. It's pretty straightforward. We do get that a lot. You know that can be very challenging. Reapply, there is no appeal. Okay, one thing we get a lot, Kelly, that we see quite frequently is, what are things that demonstrate strong ties in Nigeria? That's a big question because there are a lot of things. There is no one magic formula. I know people kind of want, this is what you have to do to qualify, and that's really not the case. Let's think about, what are some of the things that we would talk about as strong ties to Nigeria? Professional ties?
Absolutely. Professional ties, and also on the complete opposite side is, if you're an elderly person, have lived in Nigeria for your whole life, you're 70 years old, your
cultural
family is
ties,
here.
Yeah. If you have, in Kelly's example, if you have multiple grandchildren and great-grandchildren, you may not be working, and so maybe the professional ties don't always apply, but the cultural ties, the family ties, we're looking at economic ties. Professional ties would be long history in jobs. Like, talk to us about what you do. Demonstrate that you really have a strong professional connection to Nigeria.
And I feel like, just to kind of add to that point, sometimes when someone has been a professional in a career for quite a long time, we'll ask them what they do, and they'll speak sort of very generally. And it's hard for us to get a feel for what they actually do, it's important to try to explain your job. I know that you know your job, but we don't necessarily know your job. So the more you can explain specifically about what you do, can help to demonstrate.
Absolutely, and that's a really good point, because we do get a lot of generics. You know, we ask, "What do you do for work?" Response being business. It doesn't quite tell us what you actually do. What we really want to hear from you is, what kind of business? How many people do you have? Like, what do you do? We want to know what it is that is bringing your strong professional connections to Nigeria. But again, there's no magic formula. We're looking at the totality of the picture for the applicants. That changes from every applicant. Obviously, like we said earlier, professional ties for an individual who is in their, a senior retired individual is going to be very different perhaps than someone who's just starting out from school. Family ties are going to differ if you have no children, if you're single, or you're married and you've got 18 kids, which does happen. So it's very different from applicant to applicant, but we're looking at all those different ties and how they paint a picture for the applicants and demonstrate your qualifications for a visa under U.S. immigration law.
So see another question asking about M1 visas and why they're not given to Nigerians. And I'd just like to correct that question, and M1 visas are issued to Nigerians. I know, because I have issued M1 visas to Nigerians. Even, remembering that, each applicant still has to qualify. So I can't speak to this person's individual case, but M1 visas are absolutely issued to Nigerians.
Absolutely, and in the same way as Kelly said, same way that you need to qualify for an F1 or a B1, B2 visa, you still have to demonstrate your qualifications for an M1. We do issue them. Okay, what does it mean to have a visa canceled without prejudice? This is a great question. I don't think I've actually been asked this before, so good. What we do for this is, if it means that your visa is no longer valid. This happens most frequently when you're submitting for a new visa. This is often for Dropbox. We get a lot of that in. That means we're canceling your old visa. It has nothing derogatory with that canceling. It just means that that visa is no longer valid for travel. By and large, those visas are canceled without prejudice right after their expiration because you're trying to renew their visa. Every once in a while, they're canceled without prejudice because we need to reprint them because maybe we've done an error on our part. Maybe the passport number or the name was incorrect. Again, going back to correct CS will help us with this process. So we will cancel that visa without prejudice so that we can print you a new one with the correct information. There's nothing derogatory about having that. It has no bearing on qualifications for a visa. It doesn't mean anything bad. It is just something that we do so that that visa is no longer valid for travel and is taken out of circulation.
So another question that we've received is, what's the criteria for giving birth to a child in America by a foreigner? And most of you probably already know foreigners that have visas are permitted to go to the U.S. and give birth. However, it's very important that anyone that is coming up with this plan, really thinks it out and thinks of what their budget is, how much everything will be costing, because one of the requirements of being a foreigner giving birth abroad is that you can show us after that you have paid for everything, and even before that you have the ability to pay for the treatment you would like to get in the United States.
And this goes for all medical treatment. It's not just birth to, going to give birth. This is for all medical treatment in the United States. Under our immigration process, and when we're looking at your interview, we have to find that not only have you the ample funds to cover the full cost of medical treatment in the United States, which, as most people are aware, is very, very expensive, but also that you have the intent and the means to pay for all of that treatment. It is totally permissible. We do ask, of course, that if your intent is to have any kind of medical treatment in the United States and you're being at an interview and that is something you wish to do, that you do discuss that and disclose that to the consular officer at that time so that they can go and review and look at your application to ascertain whether or not the financial obligations can be met. Okay. This is something we get often. How long can someone wait for reapplying for a visa after a denial of a visa? There is no set limit on how often or how long you need to wait for a visa. What we do say is that you can reapply at any point in time, and your application will be given a full review, and for transparency purposes, we really, to the extent possible, make sure that it is being reviewed and looked at and you're interviewing with a different officer so that you do not have the same officer who made a decision. And many times at that potential secondary interview or something like that, you are presenting additional qualifications or information that's pertinent to your qualification that was not presented at the last interview. You really want to make sure, though, that when you're coming in for a visa, that you are able to demonstrate that why you're more qualified, or information that is relevant that was not discussed the last time.
Another question that we received in advance was, do consular officers issue based on mood, personal feelings, perceptions that they're feeling on that particular day? And I think it's really important to emphasize very strongly, no. Our job as consular officers is to apply the law. And we try to put aside any of our personal feelings for the day or anything apart, because we take our jobs very seriously, and we take our job to apply the law seriously. And we wouldn't be doing our job if we were letting these other things influence our decisions.
Mm-hmm. I mean, our job is, we take customer service very strongly. We really do value deeply the amount of time and effort that applicants are putting into this process. We recognize the long time it takes, sometimes hours you can be sitting and waiting in the waiting room, the stress that people coming, you're nervous at your interview. We understand that, and we want you to kind of take a breath. Don't be nervous. I know sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating when you're coming up and people are behind these windows, and we may not always be smiling, but we do enjoy our jobs because we like the work that we do. We like engaging with people. I think more than anyone at the embassy, we are getting a much more detailed look at Nigerian culture. It's fascinating, and we have a lot of fun here. We really like being here. But as Kelly said, we are really here to implement U.S. immigration law, and so there are no personal prejudices or any kind of personal feelings that go into that process. One thing I want to do, talk a little bit, jumping back a bit, about the reapplications. Sometimes people often ask, well, I'm reapplying for a visa, but I have all these additional documentation to show you. I do want to put it out there. I know we often get the question, why don't you look at documents? That is a valid question. The reason we don't look at documents is oftentimes because it doesn't have a real bearing on your qualifications for that particular visa. The documents that we're going to look at most specifically is probably going to be if it's necessary to your visa. For example, if you're trying to get medical treatment, or if you're going as a student, then probably we're going to look at bank documents, or perhaps letters from your doctor, or things like that, or scholarship documents. But other documentation, letters of invitation, etc., that you want to show us, photos, that doesn't have any impact on whether or not you're qualified for a visa. So we're not going to look at them. It's not to be mean or kind of waste people's time, but because it's not important for that particular piece of your visa process, for that interview, we're not going to waste the time, your time, and make the process longer when we don't need to, if we can come to a decision before that. So we strongly recommend, don't come in with lots of documents unless that you think they're really valuable or very important to that particular visa that you're applying for. Again, that would probably be most appropriate for those looking for medical treatment or students, and in that case would be bank statements. But that's one of the major reasons we don't really look at a lot of documentation.
And then also sometimes we might need documents if you are applying for a work visa, you have a petition, other things like that. It's important to bring those along and be ready to present them when asked, but not necessarily to feel slighted if we don't look at them, because we're trying to be as efficient and take, be as respectful to everyone that's already waiting in line. And if we were looking at everyone's papers, everyone would be there until midnight.
Probably,
I don't know.
Yeah. And if we do need specific documentation, we will ask for you to submit that. So there is an opportunity to send that documentation in if it is actually pertinent to your visa application. Okay, so we've got this question here. What are the common mistakes we've been observing over the years? I'm going to take that as for the SEAC, I think, what we talked about today. That's we kind of listed the major common mistakes that we see. I would say another thing that I see a lot and it's not a mistake. But we do get a lot of people who are nervous, and I have several times said, it's okay. You take a step, take a breath. All right, let's talk about your intent here. What do you want to do? I see it oftentimes with students, I would say. And nerves is something, we understand that, we're empathetic to that.
We're humans.
Yeah.
I mean, we understand that too. As you might even can tell from this conversation, I'm a little nervous. We understand it. You're a little nervous when you come up for your interview.
Mm-hmm.
We get it.
Absolutely. And again, it's not a mistake, but it is something we see, and we want to encourage people coming in, talk to us. We want to really know. That's part of your interview. Okay, let's see. For student visas, please, is it okay to submit a bank statement other than that of your parent? Is it a consideration for getting the visa? Absolutely. If your parents aren't the ones that are funding your studies and the bank statement is coming from another sponsor, maybe another family member, we're going to want to look at the bank statements that are funding your studies. So if they don't come from your parents, that's okay.
And be ready on that too if you're having someone else that's not a parent that will be funding your education. Be prepared to maybe discuss how you got the sponsor or what your relationship is to that person.
But do not send in fake statements. That's a very important piece, something we do see a lot. That's a mistake that we see. If you're sending in bank statements, again, when you submit that application, you are verifying that everything in there is accurate, truthful, and so forth. And if you are submitting fake statements, that will actually be a problem.
So another question is, does it mean that visa cancellation without prejudice has no effect on subsequent application? And I'm a little slightly confused by the question because it has some effect on a subsequent application in that we know you already had a visa, which influences the decision making. But as far as a negative effect, no.
It's an administrative process if you would look at it. Or canceling it, it's no longer effect. So it has no bearing or negative consideration in a future application. Okay. That's a lot of questions so far, so keep sending them in. We're really happy to be able to answer that. We have about 5 minutes left, so we're probably going to take a couple last ones in here. So if you have a really urgent one, we'll take this one that just came in. For revoked visas, how long until you can apply again? Again, as we talked about a little bit earlier, there's no time frame stipulated for how long you must wait until you apply for a visa again. Obviously, if you had a visa revoked, you're not eligible for Dropbox. You are going to be needing to have an in-person interview, but you can do that as soon as you get an appointment.
Right. But keeping in mind kind of what Heather had said before, that what we're looking for someone that either has been refused or already has a revoked visa, we're looking for a change of circumstances or some information that you weren't able to present initially, because without that, it could be difficult. So,
okay, penalty for fake statements submitted. I'm going to take a stab at this one. This one is really, I'm going to take it from the perspective of students. One of the major qualifications for a study, a visa to study in the United States is that you can afford to study in the United States. And the way that we can ascertain how you can afford to study in the U.S. is by looking at the documents. We review those documents, and when you submit documents that are fake, after we've decided we want to go ahead and issue you, we aren't going to issue that visa. Because in submitting fake documents at that particular interview, you are then demonstrating that you can't afford that. You may then reapply again, absolutely, but once you've submitted fake documents for that interview, it's going to be very hard to overcome that you can apply for that.
Right, because in the context of a student visa interview, if you have submitted fake bank statements and we were ready to go ahead and issue you, you now have you have a permanent ineligibility where under U.S. immigration law, we're barred from issuing your visa regardless of our personal.
Yeah. So the bottom line of that is don't submit a fake bank statement. That's an important piece, very important. Is there a dress code for the interview? No, but people do come in all types of dress, fancy dress, informal dress, absolutely none. It's not something we can take into consideration when doing your interview. It's not something we look at. It has no bearing on qualifications. There's no dress code. But it is nice to see, in our experience with seeing people from across Nigeria, we often have a chance to see a lot of people in traditional dress from all different regions, and that is something I think that's very unique and special for us, and that's a nice piece of our job.
Yeah, but be comfortable. Don't feel like you need to put on a suit. If you don't usually wear a suit, don't wear a suit. Wear what you would wear if you're going to any normal appointment, doctor's appointment, work for the day.
We want you to be you. We want you to be as relaxed as possible at the interview. Talk to us. Be as truthful up front. Yeah, I think that's a fun one. Okay, we have about 2 minutes left, so any final questions you want to pop in? Otherwise, we will keep going with some of the ones that have been submitted. We've been collecting questions for the last couple days on this. One question we have here is, do you have to know somebody in the United States to increase your chances of getting a visa? Absolutely not. There are a lot of people who go to the U.S. not knowing anybody. There are fantastic destination points. We do not expect you to know someone in the United States. That's why we do have that section on the SEAC that asks you to put your U.S. point of contact down. If you do know someone in the U.S., put them down if that's the person you're going to go visit. But if you know a fifth cousin who lives in Texas, but you are not going to see them and have nothing to do with them, they're not going to make you more or less qualified for a visa to the United States. We do ask that you put your relatives down, of course. We talked about the immediate family, extended family. But no, that knowing a person does not increase or decrease your chances of getting a visa to the United States.
And just tell us, it's important to just tell us why you want to go. So if you want to go to visit family, tell us that. If you want to, go to Boston to see some historical sites, tell us that.
One question I thought was quite interesting is, does travel history to specific countries reduce the chances of getting a visa? No, it doesn't. Again, it shows you've traveled to different countries. We don't weight one country over the other in terms of your qualifications for a visa. If you traveled, great. If you haven't, great. It helps paint the overall picture of your qualifications.
So another question we have might be close to our last one is, if the visa agent submitted untrue information about an application and the applicant, on discovering the wrong information, decided not to attend the interview, will it have effect on future applications?
That's a good question. The answer to that is, it depends, I guess, on how incorrect the application was filled out. What we do ask is, when you look at those applications and you see that there is something that is incorrect and you do not have the opportunity to go and change the form, you need to tell the visa officer up front. We've had that plenty of times to say, listen, this was filled out inaccurately in this section. I don't want to, I want to let you know about this. Then we can discuss that change and go forward with it. But if you don't show up and you had to fill out the last application and you didn't go to your interview and you're coming in and you filled out the CF this time, maybe just discuss it. We will see that you had a visa, maybe an open application, maybe we might ask you about it, just talk about it. We just ask for transparency and honesty with it. So that brings us to the conclusion of our Facebook Live session. Thank you all so very much for joining us today. We hope it was informative. This video will be available. You can watch it over and look at some of the, fast forward to some of the answers that you need. And it will be available on our website. So we thank you very much for joining us again. We hope to do more of these, and we thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you very much.